Homelander does a lot of horrific, horrible shit. But why does he do this? Why does he kill whoever he wants and not have empathy for none other than himself? Well, let's find out. Now, the first question that pops up in your mind probably when we're talking about Homelander and why he does all the shit he does is Homelander a psychopath? Well, let's take a further look at this. If you look at this little poster here, I have a comparison between a psychopath and a sociopath. And me personally, I believe Homelander leans more towards being a sociopath than a psycho. And I'll explain why now. A psychopath lacks guilt, remorse, and empathy. A sociopath has a lack of remorse, but guilt and empathy may be present in some cases. Now I feel this is pretty correct in terms of Homelander's character, in terms that he does not care what he does, so yeah, he doesn't have any remorse. But in some scenarios, considering Ryan especially, his son, he can be seen having some empathy and be guilty about what he's doing and want to make it up for Ryan, but he can't because he gets these outrageous outbreaks where he just crumbles mentally, but then after can be seen feeling some guilt by what he has done. If he was a psychopath, he wouldn't care for anything of this. Another thing which is really important is that a psychopath is pretending to feel emotions. A sociopath has some emotions that are felt, especially rage, but they are shallow and fleeting. This is very correct in terms of Homelander's character, because you can see that Homelander is never pretending to feel emotions, they are always real. Homelander does have emotions. You can see he gets very angry sometimes, and also very sad at points in the story, which is genuine. He's not pretending, it's genuine, and he's trying to steer away from it because he doesn't want it. But the emotions are there, especially rage. He gets very, very angry, and sometimes it is a bit shallow and fleeting. Sometimes he can hide it pretty well. Us as the viewer can see he is really angry, and sometimes he has these mental breakdowns where he goes all crazy. So this is the biggest point of why I think he's a sociopath instead of a psychopath, because of this rage that he has and these emotions that he actually feels, compared to a psychopath who just pretends to feel those emotions. Now, another point is the inability to form true emotional attachments. That's for a psychopath. And for a sociopath, he can form some close attachments to one or few individuals. And Homelander is trying to do this at least. He's trying to get closer to Ryan. He wants to get closer to Stormfront when she was alive, but he's really struggling to do this, and I'll talk about this a bit later. However, a psychopath couldn't do this. They can't get any emotional attachments. They can't care or love anybody. However, Homelander, I do believe he can feel those emotions. They're just very, very shallow and put underground because of all that happened to him in his childhood. Again, we'll go over that later. A psychopath tends to be successful. A sociopath often has consistent irresponsibility and repeated violations of law. Homelander can be discussed as successful because he's one of the biggest stars in the whole world. However, he was made this way and he was given this fame because of the powers that he's got. If he didn't have these powers, I don't think he would be successful at all. And the consistent irresponsibility and the repeated violations of law fits very well, considering most of the things he does is against the law. He is a criminal, although he has not been charged with anything. He is a criminal and he has no responsibility for anything. A sociopath also has constant lying and deception, and aggressive and reckless behavior. This doesn't even have to be talked about. Homelander is always aggressive, and he can have really reckless behavior, and he's also a lot of the time lying and trying to manipulate situations and deceive people. Now, a psychopath does this as well. They have very manipulative behavior. However, because of all this, I think he has a bit of both, but he leans more against the sociopath than a psychopath. But we'll go over this a bit later as well so you can get a better understanding. Now, what I would classify Homelander is as a sociopathic and sadistic narcissist. Now, that's a lot of big words, so let's go through these to find out what they really mean. Now, the definition of sociopath, according to dictionary.com, is a person with a psychopathic personality whose behavior is antisocial, often criminal, and who lacks a sense of moral responsibility or social conscience. Now, Homelander fits this definition really well. Obviously, he has psychopathic tendencies. Also, Homelander is very weird in conversation. He's not socially smart and seems to have no regret at all for the heinous acts that he does. Now, the definition of a sadist is, according to CambridgeDictionary.org, a person who gets pleasure by being cruel to or hurting another person. Homelander can be seen enjoying hurting other people, somehow getting a sense of proudness at times by being cruel to others. He enjoys being able to stand tall over everybody, essentially. He likes being the big man. The definition of a narcissist is again, according to Cambridge Dictionary, too much interest in and admiration for your own physical appearance and/or your own abilities. Now, Homelander loves talking about how much stronger and better he is than legit everyone else. According to him, not a single soul compares to him. He sees himself as a god who should be ruling the world. That's how big this guy's ego is, therefore it makes him a narcissist. Now, that isn't all. Homelander has more to him. I do believe that Homelander has B.P.D, also called borderline personality disorder. Now, according to mayoclinic.org, borderline personality disorder is a mental health condition that affects the way people feel about themselves and others, making it hard to function in everyday life. People with borderline personality disorder have a strong fear of abandonment or being left alone. Even though they want to have loving and lasting relationships, the fear of being abandoned often leads to mood swings and anger. It also leads to impulsiveness and self-injury that may push others away. Borderline personality disorder usually begins in early adulthood. The condition is most serious in young adulthood. Mood swings, anger, and impulsiveness often get better with age, but the main issues of self-image and fear of being abandoned, as well as relationship issues, go on. Now, just from listening to that, you can probably connect the dots. Homelander struggles a lot with relationships, and the biggest point here is probably the fear of abandonment, because that's, probably Homelander's biggest fear is being left alone. He feels like he needs someone all the time, but he's trying to let this go because he doesn't like it himself. He needs to be strong, but he can't be because this is just how his brain works. Now, I don't think in his adulthood this has gotten any better. I believe it's gotten worse than what it was when he was a child. It's really obvious that he probably has borderline personality disorder, but again, that is not all. I also believe he has D.I.D, also called dissociative identity disorder. Some people call it multiple personality disorder, but that isn't really used anymore. Now, according to Mayo Clinic again, dissociative disorders are mental health conditions that involve experiencing a loss of connection between thoughts, memories, feelings, surroundings, behavior, and identity. Dissociative disorders usually arise as a reaction to shocking, distressing, or painful events that help push away difficult memories. Times of stress can worsen symptoms for a while, making them easier to see. Now, there are very clear points to this in the show, where Homelander is talking to himself. He looks in the mirror and he has multiple people of him talking to himself. Some are good, some are bad, some are saying this, some are saying that. This is a really obvious clue that he probably has D.I.D. Now, I believe this is because of Homelander's childhood and what happened to him, because this shocking, distressing, or painful events, he has experienced that all his childhood. So that's probably what has caused this disorder to happen and then stuck with him throughout his whole adulthood and probably for his whole life. Now, my opinion about why he's like this / he has all these disorders is this. As many of us already know, Homelander was mistreated as a child. He was raised by what scientists who put him through dozens of tests. In simpler words, they were torturing him to see how much he could handle, as they wanted to make the ultimate soup/weapon. Homelander's real name is John Gilman. However, he doesn't want to use this name anymore, as it traces back to the horrific times he had in his childhood. He asks people to not use the name John when referring to him, but rather call him Homelander. When Homelander goes back to the scientists that raised him, they call him John because they know him as John. These people were horrific to Homelander. He absolutely hates them. They made that name a bad name, so he doesn't want to use it anymore because of this. He was put through tests like being burned alive in a chamber with incredibly high temperatures where he felt all the pain but didn't get burned or die. He was constantly monitored, having no privacy at all. His room was a cage or a prison cell where they kept him every day for his whole childhood. They used techniques to put mental blocks in Homelander's mind so that in the scenario he would go rogue, they could control him through the weak points they made in his head. For example, the fear of abandonment. They were hoping that if Homelander someday wanted to escape this cage or this prison he lived in, he would come back to them because he was scared of being alone and not having anybody. So they put this mental block inside Homelander's mind throughout his whole childhood so they could basically control him. All in all, they absolutely fucked up John's head, and with that scarred him immensely, and therefore I think Homelander can't function as a normal human being anymore. The things he does is absolutely horrific, but I don't think he can do anything about it. It's just what is right in his head. However, saying all this, I still do not believe Homelander is the main villain in The Boys, so if you want to know who actually is the villain of The Boys, check out this video on screen now. There I take a deep dive into multiple characters to find out who is the actual villain of the show. Subscribing and leaving a like would also help out greatly. God bless, and thank you for watching.